At the core, all combat styles are very similar. Damage output will be nearly identical between ranged melee magic. This does not, however, mean that you'll be killing all monsters at the same speed with every single combat style. What combat style do you pick in a classless MMORPG where the meta can change with a single update? In this video, I'll try as best to explain the pros and cons of each combat style to help you decide, so whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. But first, a word from today's sponsor, Opera GX, the all-in-one browser built for gamers. Opera GX turns your browser into an easily accessible one-stop hub for all the popular social media platforms like Twitch, Twitter, WhatsApp, and of course Discord, to name a few. You can also customize the browser to your liking, both audibly and visually, with themes and animated wallpapers. Now, that may worry you about Opera GX using too many resources like some of the other browsers out there, but there's no need to worry, as you can easily limit CPU and RAM usage in GX Control. If you happen to stream or play games that require a good connection, you can also limit the amount of network bandwidth Opera GX uses to reduce lag. One of the best features by far is GX Corner, which allows you to see future game releases, gaming news, and what games are currently free and up for grabs in a nice, clean overview. Opera GX is also available on mobile and can be connected to your desktop browser, allowing for easy note and file sharing through the MyFlow feature. If this sounds like your cup of tea, download Opera GX from the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. Runescape works around a basic combat triangle that indicates that one style is stronger against the next but weaker against the previous style in the triangle. If each combat style is usually most effective against another specific combat style, wouldn't it be best to focus on all three combat styles? Well, yes, but that's not entirely realistic due to the imbalanced pricing of upgrades between combat styles, which is something we'll be taking a look at in this video as well. Let's start at the beginning, leveling the skills themselves. Out of all three combat styles, ranged is by far the fastest to level to 99 due to the nature of its area of effect potential from levels as low as level 45 ranged, using regular Garachian Chompas, which turn all of your attacks into multi-hitting attacks. I recently rushed an account from level 1 to 99 ranged for a video, which I'll link in the description below if you're curious about how fast you can get level 99 at level 1 defense. Magic is the second fastest skill to level to 99 because melee requires two skills, being attack for accuracy and strength for damage, to dish out the same DPS, unlike ranged and magic, which only require one skill for both stats. Now, you might be wondering, how important is each skill to your RuneScape questing journey? In this comparison, the magic skill is the most relevant and is used in 35 quests, far more than any of the other combat skills excluding Constitution. Does this mean that you can get away by just leveling magic for questing? No, as some important questlines require a variety of combat stats, to no surprise. Magic also has the added benefit of being used for teleportation, but in 2022 the relevance of this benefit is almost zero, as we have lodestones, jewelry teleports, teleport tabs, and a bunch more stuff like group teleports, which are far more commonly used. When we take a more PvM focused look at the three combat styles, some interesting differences come into view. Melee is the combat style that suffers from having to be in melee distance, making it less effective at bosses where you have to move around during mechanics, as you aren't able to deal damage while moving. Examples are Elite Dungeons, the Arglacior, Zuck, and even Zamrak if doing it solo. Two places where melee is the best style are Corporal Beast due to its spear weakness, and Kalphite King as the Keras gives you extra accuracy. While magic and ranged are both effective at pretty much any boss, there are some bosses where magic loses to ranged, being the bosses where ranged, most obviously, excels above all combat styles. These bosses are Nex, Barrow's Rise of the Six, and Legios. I also firmly believe that ranged is the easiest combat style to use at Araxor because you don't need to think as much about your placement, and it just is an easier version of Araxor to take out. Now, melee might seem less appealing due to not being able to attack from a distance or while running around, but what melee does have going for it is decent survivability, and you'd expect that from a melee combat style when using a Scrimshaw Vampirism, not to be confused with the Aura. This is a melee-only pocket slot item that allows you to heal from the damage you deal and stacks with the Aura and with Soul Split. Combine this with the Trim Masterwork armor set, which allows you to bleed large hits and multiple smaller hits instead, and you're far more likely to survive. Now, I mentioned that you should expect a combat style that can't attack while moving, the melee class, to be the most beefy tanky style in the game. This is usually the case. In RuneScape, this is no longer the case because magic has something far stronger and you can still attack while moving around. It's a spell called Animate Dead, allowing you to flat out reduce incoming hits based on your tank armor's armor value and your defense level. You don't even need an expensive armor set to benefit from this spell, but if you do have a billion or two, and yes I said billion not million, you can buy Crit Bloom, which reduces even more damage, and it will turn you into the tankiest thing known to Gielinor. And when I say tanky, I mean it. If you want to see how insane Crit Bloom and Anime Dead are when combined, check out the video linked in the description below of me reviewing the armor set. So Magic survivability is unmatched, and that makes it the easiest style to learn bossing with. This also makes it an appealing combat style for tanking roles and group PvM. But what about damage? Well, each combat style is able to deal good damage with the right amount of unlocks, and you will be able to do pretty much any bit of content in the game just fine. Now, it is virtually impossible to compare all three styles and say which one is the best at dealing damage due to the amount of variables being quest unlocks, your own stats, gear, potions, abilities, rotation, and all that. But what are some clear differences between the three combat styles? Well, Magic and Melee can both lower the defense of their targets. Melee can do that with a Bandle's Godsword or Statia's Warhammer, while Magic can do it with a cheap Gothic Staff, which is good to use in your rotation early on anyway. Ranged cannot do such a thing. Melee is in a bit of a weird spot trying to figure out exactly what the style is trying to be. It has good damage over time and bleed damage with items like the Scourge, Trim Masterwork Spear, and Easy K. It also has incredibly strong burst damage with the Berserk ability, especially good with the new armor set, and an ability called Greater Barge, allowing you to bleed channel thresholds like Destroy and Assault, while using more abilities in the meantime. If you really want to maximize Melee's damage potential, you're going to need to juggle weapons and therefore increase actions per minute to the point where the combat style becomes unnecessarily complex and dissatisfying to play with. In my opinion, you of course don't need to juggle weapons, but other combat styles do it better, and it's far easier to do. So Melee is, at the higher end, a lot more complex than the other combat styles. Range, on the other hand, is far easier to get used to, and even the newbiest of players will be able to get more damage by simply using the right ammunition. Whether that's camping Ruby Criminal Bolts E with crossbows, using big arrows for poisonable targets with a lot of health, or by simply camping Wen arrows using your bow, it doesn't matter. Most of the ammo you can use at the high levels will increase your damage output without doing anything except equipping the items. Ranged is a combat style I consider to have a low skill floor, so it's easy to get into, but a high skill ceiling where players who know what they're doing, that are juggling different ammo and amulets, will be able to output a considerable amount of damage more. Funnily enough, that's exactly how the best bow in the game works. It gives any player more damage, but in the hands of a skilled player, it becomes a formidable weapon. Review linked in the description below, by the way. Magic, similarly to Ranged, is noob friendly, but the damage is a little lacking compared to Ranged at level 99 until you get the ancient spells from the City of St. Distant quest. Insight Fear and Exsanguinate are straight up damage buffs, and you do more damage for just using them. Use them correctly and it will be even better. Once you get yourself the Greater Concentrated Blast ability, which is one of the strongest basic abilities in the game, and it's quite affordable, you can spam easy damage and crit boost your other attacks. Now currently Magic is seen as the meta combat style for PvM because it has such absurd damage under the Fractured Staff Armoral special attack, including crit boosts, but to get there you need some serious money. And that's the issue with many PvM upgrades. High-end PvM gear can be very expensive, and while Melee might not be the most appealing combat style in the current meta, it is quite cheap and affordable when compared to Ranged and especially to Magic. High-level weapons, armor, and unlocks are quite reasonably priced due to the style not being as popular in the current meta. To name a few examples, the best in slot melee main hand weapon, which can easily be used with a cheap 30 million GP offhand Drygore, is only 200 to 250 mil. The ZGS, a sort of mini Zerk for when your Berserk is on cooldown, is only around 380 mil. Compare that to a ranged spec weapon like the SGB, which is nearly 2 billion GP, and you can see why Melee is considered cheap. Greater Barge, one of the biggest Melee DPS increases, is only around 170 to 200 million GP. Now there's a lot more to say about bang for buck, but I want to keep it simple as to not make this video too long. Let's move to area of effect damage and Slayer, because each combat style does have AoE potential. Ranged has Chins and the Decimation Bow, Melee has AoE damage using Cleave, Quake, Hurricane, and Meteorite Strike if you're using a Halberd or Lance type weapon, and Magic has good AoE for targets all around you, and the ones that are spread out as well. If you don't have all the expensive magic unlocks, I'd say Melee is your best bet for Slayer tasks that have monsters in close proximity to you, which you can hit with area of effect abilities using a Scythe, Halberd, and Lance. Examples are Corrupted Workers and Crocodile Axe. It is also a good combat style to use for some single target tasks like Acheron Mammoths and Living Wyverns because they're simply easier to do with melee due to the nature of their mechanics. Now this is very task dependent, but if you have unlocks like Greater Chain, the Insight Fear spell, the Magic Zutcape, and perhaps even Magma Tempest, magic is just so effective at ripping apart Slayer creatures in all kinds of tasks that I'd say that magic is the best overall style for Slayer if you're an endgame player. But despite magic being able to beat out melee in a lot of tasks with kills per hour, melee's healing using a Scrimshaw Vampirism still makes the style an interesting choice, and it should not be overlooked. Now while ranged is good for some Slayer tasks, like Ascension creatures, which can only really be done with ranged, Chilling Nihils or Chilling Elves, it is generally not the style you'd use for Slayer. It doesn't mean it can't be effective, in fact it's very good at Abyssal Demons as well, but it just isn't the ideal style. It's also very squishy with little methods of healing apart from Soul Split and the Vampirism Aura. For Slayer, I'd say it's important to own multiple combat styles, but melee definitely seems to be the most versatile without breaking your bank. So, while it is a good idea to have multiple combat styles, what is the best combat style overall to pick, and why is it magic? Well, magic has everything you'd want from a combat style. It has good single target DPS, is usable almost everywhere in bossing and Slayer scenarios, and has by far the best survivability. The only downside to the magic combat style is that you need to spend a pretty penny to get the most out of it. Today you can become an average magic enjoyer by getting the spells from the City of Santistan quest, a Zutcape, 285 weapons, Greater Concentrated Blast, and some cheap tank or DPS armor. This is personally the route I would pick if I would be making a new PvM account today. With that being said, if you don't enjoy a certain combat style, then don't use it. Stick to whatever you find most enjoyable at the end of the day. This video is merely a suggestion, and that suggestion is that you go with magic or ranged as an alternative, and avoid melee unless you really only want to be doing Slayer. In that case, I'd say melee is a solid pick. And remember, once you get good in one single combat style, you'll be able to make the money you need to use for another combat style far more easily. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.